Will the weather settle down into a springtime reverie, or will we both get another freeze? Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Gardenangelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
We call ourselves Gardenangelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening, and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Carol.
Hello, Dee. How'd your spring sprung? How'd your spring sprung? How'd your spring sprang? How's spring going for you?
So far, so good. We had a cold weather snap come through. No surprise. And I wrote that post about false spring, and several people were like, I'm so glad you wrote that because I almost put in tomatoes. And I was like, not yet, grasshopper. Just wait. My garden's going great.
Yeah.
How's yours?
Mine is going really good. It was St. Patrick's Day last week, so of course I planted peas. And we talked last week, I had forgot to buy snow pea seeds, and I got those, and I planted those on Friday. I think they'll still be okay. And then Sunday was gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I have sowed 2 kinds of spinach, 4 kinds of radishes, and got all my onion sets planted. So I'm all good. I did something else kind of bad.
Okay, well, tell me that first.
What? The bad thing I did?
Yeah, what did you do?
Well, I got all interested in violas last week.
Yes, weird violas, like difficult to find violas. What did you do?
Well, I bought seeds for 7 kinds of violas to grow from seed that would be perennial.
Yeah.
And these came from somebody in Utah called Diane Seeds. We'll put a link to it because she had some interesting stuff you can't find other places. Yeah, Diane's flower seeds.
Okay, so far I'm not hearing anything bad.
Oh, buying seeds isn't bad?
No.
For 7 varieties of violas?
It's a little extreme, but, whatever.
I'm a good girl because I saw this other site over in the Great Britain, and they had all kinds of, I'll call them species violas, more like the violets. These I bought are more like little violas or pansies. The other site was like species violets.
Yeah.
And I did stop myself from ordering from that site. I thought, let me have success with these seeds, and then next spring I can order those.
Good plan. And then I see you bought a 6-pack of a little plant.
With Johnny Jump Ups.
Yeah.
They don't call them jump ups for nothing because you go buy them in the hardware store and they jump up and into your cart. And the next thing you know, it's like, well, how'd that get in there?
And the next thing you know, they're covering every piece of bare ground in your garden, which can be good or bad depending on how you feel about it.
That would be good. I have not successfully gotten Johnny Jump Ups to self-sow like that.
Really?
I get a few here and there. No, I think it's just a little bit too cold. So I actually would welcome that. I would be all thrilled.
Here, people, they'll grow like mad, which I don't have a problem with, but you better like them. So you want to hear about my garden?
I definitely want to hear about your garden, Dee.
I also sowed seeds for snow peas. I can't find my sweet potted peas because I think they might be in the greenhouse. I got interrupted, and now I can't find the package of seed. And despite all my organization efforts, which is just so typical of my spring. And then I also direct sowed, and we should say direct sow means to sow the seeds directly outside. I direct sowed lettuce, vivid choy, bok choy, radishes, another kind of lettuce. I didn't do spinach because I'm really too late. I also planted some unusual onion plants. I got red candy apple and cipollini. And so I like to do weird things. And then this week, I'm going to plant my potatoes in a container. And the variety I bought was Viking, and it's a purpley red potato. So I really kind of, if I'm going to grow onions, it's going to be a weird onion because I can buy really decent organic onions now at the store. So, and organic potatoes.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, and I also...
And not much difference in taste either.
No, to me maybe on the potatoes, but not on the onions. But if you get a weird onion, that's fun. All right, so then I also planted a replacement for a dead deodar cedar, and it's the one that's called Aria, so it's golden. Mine died after it heaved out of the soil in October after the ice storm. Now, I'm not replacing my other deodar cedars that look so bad after the cold snap. I'm watching those to see if they come back, because so far they're starting to make, they're starting to look like they're alive. So we'll see. And then I also found a really sweet Japanese maple at Markham's in Norman, and I'm going to plant it today. And then I started my basil seed indoors. Wow, I did a lot.
You did a lot. Let's go back to that Japanese maple. I thought you were going to get some service berries.
I figured out a place to put the serviceberry. I'm going to put it outside of my little greenhouse because then it's not near a path. It doesn't have to be in shade, and it gets really big, and it doesn't have the same look as a Japanese maple. So I'm replacing that one Japanese maple with a Japanese maple, I decided.
Very nice. All right. Well, let's do a quote and get into flowers.
Okay.
If the sight of the blue skies fills you with joy, if a blade of grass springing up in the fields has the power to move you, if the simple things of nature have a message that you understand, rejoice, for your soul is alive. Eleonora Duse.
Didn't I find that one? I love that one.
I think you might have. I love that.
I found that on Garden of Bright Images, which is one of my favorite places to find quotes. So today we're going to talk about easy flowers for the shade. Don't tell us that you can't find anything blooming in shade. Yes, you can.
Tons of stuff blooms. Tons.
So do you want to start with the list, or do you want me to do the list?
Well, our list got so big, so we're going to go through the list like a litany,
quickly,
and then we're going to zero in on two. So epimediums, hellebores, ligularia, leopard plant, hostas, spiderwort, violas and pansies, lamium, toad lilies, blatilla, which is ground orchid, tyrella, heucheras, cordalis, trillium in wet soil, lily of the valley, Solomon seal, phlox divaricata, la 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 la.
So let's just one thing about that list. Ligularia, which is leopard plant, is now known as Farfagium japonicum. I'm just gonna, and there are varieties of it that have dark leaves, and there are varieties that have spots, which is why it's called leopard plant. So they changed the name a couple of years ago. So we're going to pick one or two for the list and do a deep dive. Do you want me to do my deep dive and then you do yours?
I want you to dive right into them because it's one I have and I love it, and I want you to talk about it.
Can I talk about two really quickly? Do we have time?
Of course we have time. If we go over that, the listeners will just have to understand that we're talking about gardening. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, just stay on that treadmill, listening to us. All right. So first one I'm going to talk about is Phlox divaricata. I forgot it was on this list. If I could talk to anybody in my area into growing a great woodland plant that blooms in early spring, it'd be Phlox divaricata. And there are various varieties out there, and some are purple and some are blue. It's known as woodland phlox. It is a native perennial, and by native, I mean native to the United States, especially the southern United States. I'm trying a new variety this year called May Breeze, which is supposed to be shipped to me. They're gonna have to wait till June because they ran out of it. But I grow the blue one and the purple one, and sometimes you can find it locally, especially if I write about it in a blog post. It seems to show up at the nursery after that, which is nice. That's one thing. And it'll just carpet your background of the woods in blue, which is really beautiful in the spring and looks good with bulbs. Okay, the next deep dive plant
Wait a minute before you go.
Oh.
Wait a minute. Phlox divaricata also is a great plant in Indiana, not just Oklahoma. It does well here too.
That's good. So it's got good cold tolerance. And I think it goes all the way down to northern Texas, but don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it does. All right, my next one is epimediums. And our friend Leonie of Legend Gardens told me a few years ago, Dee, you should plant epimediums. They're known as barrenwort, and they grow in dry shade or slightly moist shade. They do need well-drained soil. So don't plant any of this stuff in soil that is pure clay because it doesn't like it. So there's nothing sweeter than epimediums when they bloom in March. My gardening world starts with hellebores, and then epimediums, and then Phlox divaricata. So epimediums are in between those two. Most of mine died to the ground this year due to the bad weather, but they're starting to come back up from the ground, which I knew they would. And they look so sweet because the new leaves are especially beautiful. And many varieties, and there's a whole lot of sub species out there. But if it has rubrum in it, then they have red leaves. Did you know that? Yeah,
Yes.
I figured you did because you know everything. All right, and so
I don't know everything.
they also have heart-shaped leaves, which is very sweet. They are definitely a front of the border plant, although I have some planted behind a giant rock beneath that Japanese maple I was telling you about. They are fun. That's my deep dive.
They are
Your turn.
fun. Can I add a few more? Well, I got to add some stuff to epimedium.
Well, you can add. It's still your turn. Go.
Two other common names are bishop's hat because of the shape of the flowers, and fairy wings. I like to call them fairy wings because they show up. The blooms show up before the leaves do
Usually,
and then the leaves quickly come along and cover them up. At least in my garden, and they are great for dry shade.
they are great for dry shade. So, and by that we mean it does get rain at least.
Yeah, and they do need a little bit of cleanup sometimes in the spring before things get going, just to cut off the dead stuff. But definitely a worthwhile plant for shade. So my deep dive is Blatilla, which is the hardy ground orchid, Blatilla striata, and you can grow this as well, Dee. I'm sure
I do grow it. Yes, I do. I have Blatilla.
So it has lovely pink orchid flowers, and they look like little Cattleya orchids. And sometimes you get a little tiny variation on the leaves, but you wouldn't plant these and say they're very variegated with that little white stripe.
Right.
But here's the problem in Carol's garden with the Blatilla. The leaves will come up and then they'll get zapped by frost and then they'll look bad. And you get these big, long, strappy leaves that kind of look bad on top. And last year we had such a late frost, it zapped the flowers. So I got hardly any flowers out of it.
I guess you could cover them.
So I was kind of bummed.
Well,
Mine are kind of spread out in this whole kind of bed under under a honey locust tree. And I give my beds all different names. And I call this bed Bird's Blanket because it's under this tree that birds like to roost in. So the other thing about it is, and I read somewhere that they can spread.
Yeah.
And I thought, spread. And so I would call them stealthy spreaders in my garden. It's not like you wake up one day, a year after planting them, and think, gosh, I have a lot of hardy ground orchids. But 20 years after you plant them, you think, gosh, I have a lot of hardy ground orchid. And I started actually pulling them out last year because I thought they were taking over this one area.
right.
So guess what I decided, Dee?
What?
This goes back to my little viola obsession. I decided that all the Blatilla striata that are in this one bed, that this spring I'm going to dig them all up and move them someplace else where they can be like, here you go, knock yourselves out. And then that bed is where I'm going to plant a lot of my special violas that I'm growing.
Well, those will be really pretty together because it's definitely a pink. Blatilla is very pink.
Yes, but the Blatilla will be off somewhere else.
Gotcha.
And where the Blatilla was is going to be all my little violas.
Got it. Took me a minute.
Where they'll be closer to the patio and I can watch over them more closely. So
Okay.
So it's hardy to zone 5, and I'd say it's barely a 6 because it can get zapped by frost.
All right. So here, I grew Blatilla. I started growing it, 15 years ago. I have the same clump I always had. Nothing's ever happened to it.
Hadn't moved?
Hasn't moved.
Really?
It hasn't thrived. It hasn't not thrived. I mean, and if people here locally want to find Blatilla, I have seen it sold at Bob Scott's nursery. And he carries a lot of things that are old-fashioned. He wouldn't like for me to say that, but he has a lot of old-fashioned plants along with some other things. And it's a good place to find Blatilla if you want to grow it here. I've had no spreading at all. None.
Really? So here's the thing about Blatilla. I've seen it sold 2 ways. I've seen it sold in a little plastic bag as just a bare root.
Right.
And then I've seen it sold as like in a quart pot with perennials.
Yeah.
But by the time they're starting to sell it, it never has blooms on it. And so unless you knew that was the hardy ground orchid. It had a nice label that shows you that pink flower.
Right.
You'd look at that and think nothing special about that, and people would pass it by.
Right.
So just ask, and they'll probably be able to get it.
Yeah, it's not hard to find.
I'm pulling a bunch of mine out.
Well, not here. No, they don't do anything here. However, hellebores do spread. They spread with abandon here. They reseed like the little hose that they are. So,
yeah.
Okay, so.
Well, I'm going to include links to Blatilla striata at the Missouri Botanical Garden, their great website. I'll also include a link to Epimedium, so people that want to read more can go out to that website and read more about it.
Sounds good. All right, our next quote is, wherever life can grow, it will. It will sprout out and do the best it can. Gwendolyn Brooks, Winnie. It's from, I think, a poem called Winnie.
I like that.
So what are we talking about in veggies? This is a big topic.
Raised bed vegetable gardens. And we have a listener who asked us to talk about raised bed vegetable gardens. So that's what we're going to do because we both have raised beds and yours are much taller than mine.
Yes. And the only reason they're that tall is because I like to sit on the edge of them and weed. It has nothing to do with how tall you should make raised beds because of vegetables, which we are going to talk about. I just like to sit on the edge and weed them because I'm on the ground enough in my perennial garden, and I just like them about raised. I like them about the right height that I can reach across or sit on the edge. It's just a personal preference.
So let's talk about personal preferences. So there's two preferences to choose from, which is what are you going to use to make the raised bed out of? Brick, stone, wood, plastic, but there's something that forms the sides of it and it sits on the ground. I'm not talking about like you can go to Sam's Club and buy the big container that's up on stilts. We're talking about something that's on the ground.
A more permanent solution.
Yeah. I did wood the first go around, and I'll tell you that wood rots.
Yeah.
You shouldn't try to, and I used cedar boards, and they were 1x, so they were not that thick. And after about 10 years, they were pretty much a rotted mess. So it is an option. And, you know, if you don't expect your raised beds to last more than about 10 years, definitely would not get a chemically treated wood, especially if you're going to grow vegetables. And we're going to link to some great articles that talk about the chemicals that they use to treat wood to keep it from rotting. Good on your deck, probably, but not in your raised bed.
So here's the deal. I just replaced my wood raised beds. I divided them in half, and then they're now like, not squares exactly, but close to squares. I did do my posts with pressure treated wood, but the kind I used was ACQ. And I'm not telling other people to do that. It's only my posts. My other sides of my raised beds are not. They're just cedar or just non-treated wood. And that's why we're linking to those articles, because ACQ is different from CCA. And so we wanted everybody to be able to read up for themselves, because I'm not going to tell you guys how to do that. I don't think you should use chemicals either. However, my posts go all the way down in the ground, and I didn't want them to rot. It's really easy to replace a board. It takes forever to replace a post. Some people put them in concrete. I wouldn't, because they'll still rot anyway. And then you got to get that big chunk of concrete out of there, which is no fun when you go to replace it.
Right.
I'll do some pictures of my raised beds. In fact, I need to do a video and then kind of tell people what. And then my other bed, which is my potager, those are in stone. Well, not stone. Mine are in concrete. But so your sister, you said, has raised beds from foundation blocks. Are you talking about concrete blocks?
Yeah, concrete blocks like you would use around here to build the foundation, like around a crawl space or whatever.
Right.
And she had kids in college that were home last spring and didn't really have jobs, and so she put them to work making those beds. And I think they are 3 blocks high, so you can sit on the edge of them and you can weed and stuff, and they're pretty nice. And then a lot of people don't like the look of the holes because those things are not solid. They have holes in them. She's got all kinds of ideas about planting stuff inside those holes, and I'm like, you could put little annuals and alyssum and things like that in there, and it would look all right.
Marigolds, things like that. But then you can't sit on them.
Sure, smaller plants. Yeah, then you can't sit on it. I have I'll call them. I think they're 4 by 12 by 3-inch thick edging stones that I got, and I have them layered too high, and actually paid people to come in and do it. And the first level is on a base of gravel that was tamped down, and they put that first level on and leveled it, and then the second level on there. And so I have to get out there and adjust it every spring. It kind of gets a little cattywampus or whatever, but that was 10 years ago, and it's still 11 years ago. It still looks pretty decent. I just kind of shore it up a little bit, and I keep adding leaves and dirt, and they never really flow over or anything. It just kind of all settles in.
It does.
We got to talk about the next part, which is the bottom of the raised bed.
Yeah, that's always something I get asked about. And that people always, I'll quickly say that my potager kit, I built it in 2009, also with concrete blocks that are decorative. I think mine are 4 high. Once again, we use them as benches, the edges of them. I do have some movement on one of them because I do live on a hill. And so mine are partially glued together because you do that with those along with posts. Long story, but eventually we'll have to fix those, but not today. Not until they actually fall apart. Let's see. We're going to talk about fabric. You talk about the fabric. Ugh.
Well, so I would like to say that don't treat the raised bed like you're creating a giant container. And so people want to say, well, what fabric or plastic should I put in the bottom? And I'm like, none. Don't put anything in the bottom. Put dirt in it. Well, what dirt should I get? And you should get good. This is going to be kind of on the expensive side, but well worth it. You should get a good planting mix from a local
dirt
mulch
company
place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so locally here, there's Indiana Mulch in different places, and they have stuff where they have mixed in compost. That's a good starter. And then you're going to gradually add compost and leaves, and you're going to mix things into this soil. You're going to keep working it to enrich it every year, but don't put a bottom on it.
You don't mix your amendments in, right? Don't you just put them on top in the fall and then they degrade over time? You don't till it.
I put them on top. I do not till, so I put them on top. They don't degrade completely in the fall, and so what I do is just fork it over with a garden fork. In fact, I forked over one section to plant my onions and radishes and stuff. But I was thinking that this fall, I guess, I think what I'm going to do is put the leaves on top and then kind of mix them in. I think they'll rot better. So I'm still learning. I'm a young gardener. I'm still learning.
Aren't we all? Okay, so in my case, locally, I used Minic materials for my soil, and the soil I use is Rich Mix, which has manure in it. I know there's some controversy out there about manure. I don't buy into that controversy and don't care about it personally. Ooh, what an opinion I have. If you don't like manure, you'll have to find something else. They also make a garden mix, which has their compost mixed in with it. I put compost on mine every fall, and I put raised leaves on them every fall, and I also mulch. Did I say raised leaves? I didn't mean that. I meant shredded leaves. I shred leaves. I have a leaf shredder. So shredded oak leaves go on in the fall, and those shredded leaves will just be worked down with the earthworms. And I do not ever dig. I don't do dig forks. I don't do that anymore. Did that back in the old days, but when I was in ground, but I don't do it now. For one thing, my beds are too tall, and I couldn't do it. I'd have to stand on the side of the bed. It wouldn't work. So the other thing is, I know Minic does deliver. It is not cheap. And I mulch my beds with shredded pine bark starting about now around my plants once I do my transplants. So I might pull back some of that mulch if it hasn't totally degraded, and then I just put the seeds down there. And I never have any trouble with the seeds being covered up. So that's a lot. So are you going to talk a little bit about the no-dig method? Because I guess I just sort of discussed it. a little bit.
Yeah, you did discuss it. Before we go to that, the other thing I wanted to do was give a shout out to Donna Balzer up in Canada.
Yes.
On her newsletter, she had a link to a website where they have done studies to show how extensive the root systems are on some of these vegetable plants. And we're going to include a link to that, because when you go out there and see like how much root a tomato plant can really have, or Brussels sprouts or whatever, you'll realize that a 6-inch deep raised bed with a fabric bottom isn't going to cut it.
No, but if you don't put fabric on the bottom, it can also go down into the regular soil at a certain point. And so that's another good reason not to put fabric. I will say that if you do your beds as tall as I have, you have to put a lot more soil in there. And so it's kind of more expensive. But over time, It's a great investment if you're going to stay in the same place. If you're not going to stay in the same place, just use containers for your vegetables. And we'll probably talk about that again soon.
Yeah. And so next week, let's talk about the layer method of gardening, the use of cardboard, and some of that stuff next week for people who are like just wanting to start a new bed and not necessarily a raised bed. Let's talk about that next week. Let's talk about a book now, but I'm going to do a quote. Ready?
Wait just a second. I wanted to say one more thing about the fabric. A lot of people in Oklahoma think that it'll stop Bermuda grass. It does not at all. Okay, moving on.
Lesson of experience. All right, here's the quote. Gardening is a work of a lifetime. You never finish. Oscar de la Renta.
I didn't know Oscar was a gardener. But good on him.
Yeah, apparently he had a huge big garden wherever he lived. I guess he had a pretty extensive garden. Though the idea that he gardened, he had a big garden. So our book this week is, okay, this is kind of a little bit of a long title, but we'll go with it. The First Time Gardener. Growing vegetables. All the know-how and encouragement you need to grow and fall in love with your brand new food garden. And this is a First-Time Gardener's Guide #1 by Jessica Sowards. You found her on Instagram.
I think you found her first because I was like, I don't know who Jessica is. And then I felt kind of dumb because she's a big-time Instagrammer. Here's the thing about this book. It is a lot like my book. But if you've read my book and I didn't say it the right way, you could read this book. And I will say that it is laid out in a very just distinctive. I mean, the layout is just like if you had a Trello board and you wrote the book from a Trello board. That's what it reminds me of. And that's not to say anything negative about it.
We're going to talk about Trello boards next week.
Yeah, which she's got me started on this too. But I mean, it is a very simple, and I'm not being derogatory, guide. I'm saying that if you have never gardened before, this is a good thing to do. If you're an advanced gardener, this is not the book for you. But if you're brand new and last year you tried to start a garden and it didn't work and you can't afford to hire me or I don't have time to come see you, this would be a great book to read. I think she does a good job. And that's about all I have to say about it.
Very good. And that's The First Time Gardener. And it's going to be a popular book because there are a lot of new people into gardening this time, which takes us right into our dirt. Dee, I read about the Million Gardens movement this week. Did you see this information?
No, I do not know about the Million Gardens movement. Tell me about it.
Well, I get a newsletter from Modern Farmer, which used to be a magazine. I don't know if it's still a magazine.
No, I don't
but anyway,
think so.
they've partnered with somebody named Kimball Musk of Big Green, and there's a big website for Big Green. And yes, this guy is the brother of Elon Musk.
Elon.
I'll just quote from the website. The Million Gardens movement will make it possible for any family, no matter where they live or what resources they have, to grow their own healthy food. We'll provide the families that need it most with a beginner-friendly garden kit, creating healthy eating habits to the home and increasing families' ability to choose, grow, prepare, and eat healthy food.
Yes, they have a whole group of garden educators all over the United States. I don't know any of these people, but it doesn't matter. I mean, maybe they're really good garden educators. There's one from Indianapolis named Colleen Donahoe. Do you know Colleen?
I do not know Colleen, but they're going out into areas that are underserved by or by grocery stores and helping people learn to grow food.
Like
and
deserts.
They're going food deserts. I couldn't think what those were called, Dee. And they're going to go out
You're welcome.
to schools and just kind of teach people and get the whole family involved in growing food. So I think it looks like a very promising thing. And so I thought we would provide a link to our listeners and they can go check it out for themselves.
That sounds great. So now we're moving on to our garden commissions.
Okay, so my garden commission for the week. After today, it looks like it's going to rain all week. I don't know. But I need to.
It's raining today here.
It's not. Well, that means it's raining tomorrow here. I'm going to sow more seeds. I'm going to sow my viola seeds inside. I might start my peppers at the end of the week. I'm going to get the kale and the lettuce and I don't know what else out in the vegetable garden. Just do more cleanup. Anyway, the season's begun. Something to do every day.
I am going to plant that Japanese maple that I bought. I'm going to find a serviceberry. I could order it online, but I'm trying to find it locally so I don't have to pay shipping because I'm paying shipping on some other things. If my other things come in from High Country Gardens and a couple of other places, I will plant those.
Very good.
And get them in the ground because they are perennials. It is still too early, everyone, in both of our climates to plant tomatoes. You can plant perennials right now.
Yes.
And a few perennial fruits and vegetables like strawberries. If you want to plant strawberry plants in my climate, knock yourself out.
Yes. They grow great in Indiana. So you can grow them. In fact, it's almost a little bit too late. You plant those bare root. Get them in the ground now.
You can plant them from pots here. You can plant them from pots here. You don't have to plant them bare root. But go ahead.
We want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us. Also, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share your podcast with your friends? Someone did last week, and boy, that word of mouth does really work.
It sure does. And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites. And if you want to help support us, use the affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission. Cost you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye.